Hello everyone. Today the subject is suffering and why we seem to be suffering so much right now. I mean, throughout the ages, we've had wars, we've had, life expectancy, which wasn't very good. I mean, it was medieval times, but the suffering now seems to be very intense, and I wanted to talk about that because I'm seeing it in my therapy room too. It's like a different form of suffering. It's the suffering of the modern age, and how do we survive it, and how do we understand it. And there's a lot of things which we've never had to contend with before. We have artificial intelligence, which seems to be confusing and terrifying people. We have the planet. We have, the capitalist economy that might be changing, and we're trying to find something new. We're worried about the family units and the way we're bringing up our kids. And science is now showing that there is a direct link between childhood and adult illnesses and personality disorders, and it's not a guess, it's known now. And so there may be a lot of guilt around the way we've been doing things in the past, and we're so ashamed of maybe where we are right now and how did we get to this place, and we should have done better, and we're kind of beating up on ourselves a lot. And then we're also awakening, because whenever there's a lot of stress exiting, there's always an awakening, because suffering's a great way to wake up. I mean, if everything's going well, you don't really need to go inwards. You don't really need to do your reviews of yourself and how you're living and, go towards any form of upgrade. You can just kind of think, I'm all right, I don't need to change. Now, we need to change if we're going to survive as a human species. So there's also that sense of urgency in the collective. So there's a lot of shaking that's going on. There's COVID that's been going on, which created a mass hysteria around death. We've never really thought about death lately because everything seemed to be going fine, and then something invisible just put a stop to the world, and we felt helpless and out of control and had to come to terms with how life is uncontrollable sometimes. You can't control everything. It doesn't matter whether you can go to the moon. It doesn't matter. It's nature can just throw something and just the whole world can stop. So there can be this shock, oh, we weren't as in control, we didn't see that coming. And so if you imagine a bottle and you're shaking the bottle and there's a lot of bubbles and fizz because it's a fizzy bottle, that's what's happening. There's COVID's a shake, and there's the environment that's a shake, what we're doing to the environment. There's shame around how we treated ethnic minorities and women and animals. There's 3 shakes there. There's shakes on technology, like how are we coping with all this information that's coming in, and our physiologies they're not designed for that much information, and we have a sedentary life. So we're having to raise our level of awareness so fast to contend with all of these stresses. And so we do live in a modern stressful age. And what's happening now is nothing can hide. So all of the dark shadows, all of the stuff that we didn't want to see, that we wanted to ignore, that we were doing to other people, that we were doing to the environment, that we were doing to ourselves, because ultimately everything we do to something that we perceive as other, we do to ourselves. Now, from one level of consciousness, we think we're separate, and we can get away with things, and we can do something and you know, screw somebody else over and get away with it. On another level of consciousness, we realize we're absolutely interconnected with everything, the plants, the animals, the cosmos, and we don't get away with anything. You don't get away with anything. You don't get away with anything. And also, because nothing's hiding, you know you don't get away with anything. And so the feedback between what you're doing to the other is much more immediately observable in our physiology, because we get stressed. We don't know why we're stressed, but we're also knowing that, oh, we're doing things to ourselves ultimately. And so pausing, understanding that we've come so far to even have that awareness that we are not separate, that we do not escape anything. And what do we do about that? Well, we have to expand our awareness to even be able to absorb the stress. And another analogy would be if you have an ocean and you drop ink in the ocean can absorb the ink. It's just one drop and it just goes poof. But if we're not so expanded, it's like a puddle and we drop in ink, it just goes black and it's like, oh, it's too much. So we are forced to expand in consciousness to deal with all of this. So it's wonderful. It's a great time to be alive. You are going, whether you like to or not, expand into higher states of consciousness, into more refined states of awareness, into love of all beings, realizing that the animals are not lower than you at all. There's no hierarchy anymore. From a unity perspective, there's no hierarchy. It's not like you have humans at the top and then plants and animals down here. No. There's definitely an equality, and we all have things to offer. And that's why in this day and age, there's a desire to do time in nature and plant medicines, and it's animal communication. There's going to be a huge wave of interspecies communication coming. The first wave was, oh, let's meditate, and people were thought to be weird if they sat in silence not so long ago. Now it's kind of mainstream. Okay, people meditate. We know the science behind the benefits of that. Great. And then it was weird, 100 years ago it was weird for women to have rights. Now that's not weird anymore. It's not weird for ethnic minorities now to have rights. And soon animals will have more rights. And soon we will be able to communicate with other species without words. That's where we're going, because our levels of awareness are going to get so refined. But in order for those levels of awareness to get refined, all of the stress and junk has to be thrown out of the system, has to be thrown out. And so the shaking is kind of a way of getting all this stuff to come up to the surface, to bubble up, and then it's gonna explode. And so I see it in some individuals that they're de-stressing, they're exploding. They can't hide anymore. They need to deal with their wounds. They need to upgrade their consciousness. They need to meditate. They need to figure it out. And that's wonderful. So if you're emotional, or you're feeling anxious, or you're feeling depressed, great. It's all information. It's all good. Something good is happening. Flatlining's great. We can do it for a while. But when things start to move around and things start to exit the physiology, that's something to get really excited about. And remember, we're not separate. So our physiology is connected to the earth, which is connected to the multiverse. So anything that's coming out of us is also coming out of the earth. And so everything's evolving. Everything's evolving. And it's so exciting. And consciousness is going to be a big word, or it already is this discovery that everything is conscious and everything has consciousness. And it's just, I think it's one of the best times to be alive, even though there's a lot to struggle with, to contend with, but the struggle is part of the beauty. If you have a tree and it wants to grow strong, the wind against the bark makes the tree strong. So there's a lot of wind right now strengthening us up. So we shouldn't just be like, oh, the world's terrible and oh my God, afraid of this, and we're a waste of space and we should be wiped off the planet and we messed up and oh my God, what's going to happen? This is just all exiting. It's all going to raise our level of awareness. We can understand that sometimes the shift's already happened and we're just playing catch up. So we've already evolved, we're just playing catch up. And so the catch up is the integration process. And so wherever we see people stressing or blowing up, know something good's happening, know that they'll figure it out. And if we see communities on the street, like homeless communities, because the system's not working, know that those people sometimes come into their bodies in this lifetime to dissolve collective stress by living a life that reflects the problems of the society in that culture and age. And so if there's an epidemic of loneliness or separation, then people are going to live that. And through dissolving the loneliness and the separation, and figuring a way of surviving it, they share that knowledge with the collective. So another way of thinking of it is this. You have an entrepreneur who's creating this app, and it's going to change the world and it's going to help us, and maybe it's really good for science and maybe it's really good for medicine, I don't know. And he's like, oh, she's amazing and is in the press, and we think, wow, this person's changed the world. That's one person that's changed the world. You have another person, let's say a homeless person that's got rotten feet, that's been on the streets for 40 years, that's never integrated back into society, but stayed alive. They stayed alive even though they had rotten feet, even though they were dehydrated, even though they didn't have any friends to rely on or family. They had to deal with all of their shame and demons and loneliness and stay alive. And so they would have extricated themselves out of suicidal states just to stay alive. And the knowledge of how to stay alive in suffering, they have shared in the collective. So one person isn't more valuable than the other. You have the homeless person who's a great soul that's doing a lot of inner work and sharing the knowledge of how to stay alive when there's suffering. And there's an entrepreneur that's living a different life and also helping us stay alive, maybe in a different way. Both people are valuable, and both people are connected to one another and sharing information. And so in the New Age, there is no hierarchy. Everybody is of value. Everybody is doing what they came here to do. It might look different, but they're still doing something. Everybody has value. Nobody is more valuable than anybody else. And that's when we move into a unity perspective, we start to realize that everybody is the light. Everybody brings the light. We're all, like, if you imagine a sun and it's shining on different surfaces, we're all part of the same sun. We're just different light beams with shining on different things, highlighting different things, dissolving different things in different ways, but we're all connected. So I'm very, very joyful about whatever's happening in the world. And the world is not meant to be blissful all the time, because it's in a relative field. There is a space which is beyond the world, which is transcendental, that we can connect to through in our higher states of awareness. And if we have a meditation practice, that seems to be the best way to do it right now. I'm not saying you can't connect to that field or space. It doesn't really have a word without doing a meditation practice. And in the future, we won't probably need a meditation practice. But right now, that's a way of connecting to it and moving beyond all of the struggles in the relative, all of that, connecting to it. And it's an intelligent field, it's a dynamic field, and it's very peaceful, and it can fill our physiologies with a certain amount of resilience and intelligence, so that when we are in the relative field, we can survive it, because we aren't just it. We're beyond it, but we're in it. And so that's why I personally love my meditation practice, because I get to absorb so much stillness and then bring that stillness, and that stillness does contain intelligence, into my life, into, whatever it might be, whether it's trouble paying the bills, whether it's arguments or relationship dramas, whether it's figuring out how to do something, whether it's going for a run or a walk. I'm bringing the stillness into each area of my life. So it's, if there's any difficulties, it's absorbed, because I'm not fully just in the relative. I hope that's not too confusing. But you live a parallel life where you're in it, 1 foot in it, 1 foot out of it. 1 foot in it, 1 foot out of it. You live 200% of life, 100% transcendental, 100% relative, integrating the transcendental into the relative, which means that you're not so bothered by it. You feel deeply and you want to help, but you're not so bothered by it. And that's linking back to the ocean and the drop. You become very oceanic. And then the stress, COVID, drops into the ocean. It's dissolved in the ocean. AI, fear, drops into the ocean. It's dissolved into the ocean. Dysfunctional family units, dissolved into the ocean. So we're all moving in an oceanic direction, and it's really exciting. So I wanted to share that good news about how suffering can actually be of benefit, and to bring some hope.